Welcome, Gunrunner.
Hello everybody, Q&A the Lead here, and I've got a new hardware review for you here. And as you can see, this week we are going to be looking at the Sega Game Gear. And I have actually covered the Game Gear on the channel before, but that was a really early review that I did. It's really bad quality. It's in 4:3 kind of resolution and etc, etc. So I thought it was best that I did a new review of the Game Gear in lovely 4K high definition, and yeah, so here it is. This isn't actually the same Game Gear I looked at either in the previous review. When I did my old review, I had a really nice boxed one with just about everything you can think of with it actually. But unfortunately, that one's long gone. I actually sold it. I decided to sell my Game Gear and all my Game Gear games and everything off years ago. I was trying to slim down my collection when I got into a relationship with my now wife, and I decided that I needed to when I moved in with her because my collection took up near enough my whole flat. So yeah, it was one of the first things that went because I didn't really have so much nostalgia for it, a lot of fondness for it. I'm not a huge fan of the Game Gear, as I will go into reasons why, etc. Yeah, so that's why I don't have that one anymore. But just recently, one popped up on Marketplace, and funny enough, it was literally 2 streets away from where I live. So it seemed rude not to go and grab it. It was only 50 quid. And came with a stack of games, so I couldn't really argue with that at all. I was really pleased with that pickup. So that's this one. Didn't have a box, although you can see here I've got lots and lots of lovely boxed games. So to give a little bit of history first of all, like I always do. Yes, so the Game Gear was released in October 1990 in Japan, with a EU, European, North American release taking place around April 91. It was obviously released to compete with not only the Nintendo Game Boy, which was released in April 89, but also the Atari Lynx, which was the world's first colour handheld, released in September 89. So it came quite a bit after the both the Lynx and the Game Boy, over a year after, in fact. So, and even then, apparently it was really rushed to market because Sega actually had a chance to buy the Lynx, and they turned it down because they were developing or saying they were trying to develop a portable Sega Master System instead, because they felt it was a more cost-effective option. But apparently they encountered loads of problems trying to get it to work as they wanted to do. But that's why it came out probably later than you would expect it to. But they did try to rush it to market. As I say, lots of technical issues, which may be why the Game Gear isn't quite as good as it should be. Maybe that's why, which I will go into in due course. But yes, that's a little bit of the history. Obviously, because it was very similar hardware to the Master System, they were able to release a lot of games for it quite quickly because it was quite easy to port them over using much of the same code. The main issue actually was just making adjustments to the graphics, or redoing them slightly to fit on a smaller screen, but they kept the screen the same ratio as a TV set, which is another thing that I'll go into actually in a little while, as I'm sure you know. But actually, while I mention the Lynx and the Game Boy, it would be interesting to show you the difference, because a lot is made of the size of the other handhelds compared to the Game Boy. So here's my old tatty Game Boy with the awful screen because someone tried to super glue it back on, so it's got these horrible kind of glue smears all over it. I need to just take it off and put a new one on it, but I was given this for free, so I can't complain. It works perfectly as well, but there we go. So let's put that up so you can see there. If we put the Game Boy in front of the Game Gear, we're talking probably a good couple of centimetres larger all the way around the side and the top there. So probably a good couple of centimetres on each side, and a good couple of centimetres probably in height as well, difference. So yeah, it's not massive compared to the Game Boy by any means. Let's have a look at the Lynx. I'm not going to do the Lynx 1 because we all know the Lynx 1 is massive. I'm going to use the Lynx 2 because the Lynx 2 was released about the same time as the Game Gear, so really it was the main competitor to the Game Gear. So therefore, if I put it like that, it actually looks loads bigger the Lynx, but it's actually not. There's not a massive difference in size. So if I actually put the Lynx at the back, because it is the slightly larger console, and then we put the Game Gear in front, you can actually see that they're identical height, and the Lynx is only slightly wider. There's really not a lot in it at all, and I don't think a lot of people realise that. It is a bit thicker, which I'll show you. If you put them back to back, you can see that the Lynx is a bit thicker, but really in size wise there's not a lot of difference between the Lynx 2 and the Game Gear at all. Yeah, you still hear people say that the Lynx 2 is massive, not the Game Gear so much, but there we go. Obviously the Lynx was considerably more powerful, being a 16-bit handheld, whereas the Game Gear is an 8-bit handheld. So it's actually quite surprising that there is such a little difference in many ways. But I thought that was interesting to show you that, and the size difference. So what we'll do now is we'll have an actually look at the Game Gear itself. So what we've got on the front, we've got a speaker down there in the bottom left hand corner. We've got two buttons. We've got a start button. We've got a really horrible squashy joypad. I absolutely hate the Game Gear's joypad. It is really small, which isn't great, and it's just awful. I mean, it's loose, and they were like this when they were new. And it's squashy and just doesn't really work as you'd want it to. Really imprecise, and really is quite crap, to be honest. On the back we have two battery slots, as you can see. So I'll just take one off, and it takes 6 AA batteries, the same as the Lynx does. But believe it or not, the battery life on the Game Gear is worse than the battery life on the Lynx, which again is really surprising and really strange. With the Lynx being the more powerful console, not only that, the Lynx has a larger screen, and the Lynx has a better screen than the Game Gear. Yet the battery life on the Lynx 1 is about 4 hours. The battery life on the Lynx 2 is about 5 to 6 hours. It's actually quite considerably improved, as one of the best things Atari did with the Lynx 1 to the Lynx 2 is improve the battery life quite dramatically, with a number of internal improvements. Whereas the Game Gear is like 3 hours, which is just awful. Really pathetic battery life, really bad. On the top we have brightness control. Is that the brightness or is it volume? No, that's the volume. The brightness is on the right hand side, which is a bit strange. Why they're not both on the top. AC adapter, standard one, can use the same one as the Master System and Mega Drive. An on-off switch, and then behind this little door here is actually the socket for the link cable for 2-player gaming. And then on the back, obviously, you've got a cartridge slot, and these slots here were for additional things like, and that hole there actually on the bottom there as well, you can see a screw hole. Stuff like the Master System converter and the TV tuner, and things like that. And carry straps, you could put carry straps into those as well. The Lynx has got something similar on the back for carry straps as well. So there's lots of things you could do with those. So actually, even listen to that, how rattly it is, and that's literally just the buttons. It's the poor build quality, and that's one of the biggest problems actually, which I'm going to go into, because if you pick up a Game Gear today, you will find that the vast majority of them don't work. And indeed, this one will power on, which you'll see actually, but this one does seem to be faulty, unfortunately. So it looks fine there, but you'll notice you can't hear any sound. So there's no volume. The game starts okay, but this is a good example actually, because you will be able to see the screen quite clearly, and you will actually be able to see how poor the screen quality is, because it has, the LCD isn't very good quality. It blurs a lot, but it's also very inconsistent. Some bits appear brighter than other bits. The backlight isn't the best. So what this one tends to do is the game starts and then it tends to corrupt. It's actually just started okay, which I'm quite surprised at. But there we go. It's quite a blurry. See, it's crashed now. That's what it keeps doing. Is the games start and then they crash. So it needs a full recap. You can get them repaired, replaced with the capacitors. And you know when you turn on. This is what it does, which does fix the issues. Usually gets the sound back, and will stop it glitching up and turning off and stuff. If I try to start the game, you'll see it will all corrupt if it starts at all. There we go. That's what it does. But yes, the screen quality of the LCD wasn't great at all. So let's talk a little bit now about the games for the Game Gear. So here's a cartridge. Here's a Sonic the Hedgehog cartridge. So they're quite small cartridges, very similar actually to Game Boy cartridges. I'll grab one for comparison. So there we go. Very similar indeed in size and thickness and stuff. Unlike the sort of more advanced card format that the Lynx used. So originally the Game Gear was bundled with columns. That was the original packing, which was a really good packing actually, because the Game Boy came with Tetris. They were going for a similar thing, and Columns was an absolutely terrific game as well. And then later on, actually the main packing for a while later on was this cartridge, this Sega Game Pack 4-in-1, which is actually a pretty cool packing as well, because it's got Columns, Flash on it. It's got Sega Championship Tennis. All the games were made specifically for this cartridge. It's got a penalty shootout game. What's the other game? Road Rally, I think it's called, or something like that. I was trying to remember what it was. So yeah, that was the later packing. There was other packs available, especially once later on in the Game Gear's life, because it wasn't probably quite as successful as Sega hoped it would be. I think it sold about 10 million units all in all. Which isn't bad, but obviously pales in comparison to the Game Boy. They actually handed the Game Gear over to Majesco, and they took over the manufacturing and marketing of the Game Gear and produced their own games. And as we're talking about games, that ties in nicely, you see, because I've got some of Majesco's games here, as you can see, because they've got this pink. This was only in the US, I may add. They didn't do anything in Europe. I think it was all still being done by Virgin Mastertronic in Europe, but yeah, they had this this pink packaging. That was the Majesco style, with the Sega officially Sega seal of quality on there. So yeah, so some of this stuff was also on the Master System, like Lion King and Aladdin. They were games originally done by Virgin, but Majesco re-released a lot of stuff. And also I've got here this one, that's the original American packaging. This Andre Agassi tennis one here. They had this strange. I always thought this was a really weird packaging. So I always thought that look, it was stuck on. It didn't kind of look natural to the packaging, that because it was kind of a weird, just square shape at the bottom. And I always thought that American box design was really lazy and a bit rubbish. That was the original American box design, and this was the latest Majesco one. And these ones down here, these quite natty ones like this Devilish here, that was the European box design, which I really like, because obviously the Master System had this grid pattern with white and black. The Mega Drive had it with black and white, had the reverse of the Master System. And then Game Gear had this silver and grey pattern, which I thought was really smart. I really liked the Game Gear boxes. I thought they looked really good. Really stood out with all the information and stuff on the back of them. And Devilish is actually really good. Port of the Mega Drive game with the same name. Probably one of my favourite Game Gear games, actually. I really like it. And yeah, so the Game Gear library is pretty large. I think it's about, I'm trying to remember, I think it's about 300 odd titles. It does share a lot of titles with the Master System, obviously, and with the Mega Drive in many ways. You know, a lot of the same titles appear, but obviously the Game Gear games, versions of those games are downgraded, obviously, quite a bit from the Master System one. So you've got stuff like Sonic and Streets of Rage. There's Dynamite Heady. I'm just trying to think of some other famous Mega Drive games. Shakan. So there's stuff like that they did do for the Game Gear. A lot of stuff just ported over the Master System. But the Game Gear does have some exclusive games. Not many, but probably one of the most interesting ones actually is there's a Panzer Dragoon game for the Game Gear, which I actually show in this video, called Panzer Dragoon Mini, which I thought was really cool when I discovered that. I didn't know about it back in the day. I'm not sure it came out in Europe actually, but yeah, it was really cool discovery to find out it got a Panzer Dragoon game. Obviously around the same time that the Saturn was being released by Sega, so they kind of released Panzer Dragoon for the Saturn. They still had the Game Gear going in the background, and did some new stuff for that. Yes, that's really cool to see. But that's the games really. It does have a very good games library. Obviously, the Game Boy has a larger library, but the Game Gear does have a much larger library than the Lynx. Although I would argue that I prefer the Lynx games library. Controversial point, because I'd say that the quality of the Lynx library is really strong. It probably only has about 10 bad games, if that, in its whole library. Whereas there's a lot of crap on the Game Gear. I'm not going to lie. A lot, you know, it doesn't. I don't think the quality on average is as high. And when I think about games that I'd want to play, there's more games that I'd want to play on the Lynx than the Game Gear. And obviously, because so many of the Game Gear games were released in another form, like either the Master System or the Mega Drive, I'd probably rather play, especially if it's on the Mega Drive, rather play those versions of that game. Whereas the Lynx has an awful lot of either exclusive games that didn't come out on anything else, or the definitive version of that game. Especially when we're talking about some of the arcade ports on the Lynx, which are obviously outstanding stuff like Stun Runner, Road Blaster, stuff like that, which are the best home versions of those respective games. The Game Gear doesn't really have that, but obviously the Lynx is a 16-bit system. The Game Gear is an 8-bit system. I did say I was going to mention Game Gear accessories as well. So I've already mentioned the fact that there was a cable that you could put in the top to link two machines. There was various obviously carry bags and straps and things like that. you could use. There was also, as I mentioned, the Master Gear converter, which I do have one somewhere, but I'm blowed if I can find it. I cannot find it anywhere, so I gave up looking. But I can stick a picture of that up in the top corner for those that want to see it, what one looks like. But it's a quite big bulky thing that goes in the back. Obviously it has to be quite bulky because Master System cartridges, you know, are about that width, so they're not a lot smaller than the Game Gear, so it is quite a bulky thing. And the thing I found with the Master System adapter was I remember thinking how cool it was and being a bit jealous actually when the Master Gear adapter came out, because I had a few friends with Game Gears that suddenly they would have all these extra games that they could use. But then one of my friends who already owned a Master System bought the Master Gear adapter, and he brought it into school with a load of his Master System games, and we actually found that a lot of the Master System games, the sprites and stuff were so small on the Game Gear screen that it made the games almost impossible to play. The one in particular I remember was Afterburner, where I couldn't really see the enemies, so I found it nigh on impossible to play, which is a bit of a shame. So it kind of defeated the point of it slightly, and but it was still a cool thing. I remember hoping that Atari would do a 2600 or 7800 adapter for the Lynx, but they never did, which is a shame because that would have been really cool. So the other thing, of course, I've got mentioned, I already mentioned it in the video, here is what I did find is my TV tuner for the Game Gear. These now are completely useless, obviously. You can pull the aerial out. This is like the longest aerial in the world. It's massive, look. And again, I've got a funny story about this, I'll tell you in a moment. Absolutely huge aerial that you have to pull out to use it, but obviously because now there is no analog signal for TV in the UK anymore anyway, some other countries still got an analog signal, so there's nothing you can actually pick up because we're all digital now over here. But that plugs in there like that. It's actually not that big. Show you it from the back, doesn't stick out that much. Very, very clever device that allows you to turn your Game Gear into a portable TV, and then it has a manual tuner, which you can see there along the top, a switch you can change the bands, AV in, external antenna, so you could actually use it as a TV properly as well. But what I will say about it is it was really difficult to actually get a signal on it. My friend brought it into school to show off, and that he had it because it was quite expensive, and it couldn't pick up anything at all. And the only way you could get a signal was actually climbing on top of the roof of the science block on our school and holding it up in the air with the aerial out fully, and then he managed to get a bit of a very, very fuzzy BBC One. So there we go. It wasn't even really the most useful thing in the world. I think the TV tuner was a bit of a gimmick. And again, as a Lynx owner, I remember being really, really, really jealous of the TV tuner. And I remember one being mooted for the Lynx at one point because the Game Gear had it, and so did the PC Engine handheld have one as well. But apparently the Lynx one, they did actually look into developing one, but it never got very far because they decided that it was too expensive and not really worth it. And they kind of got proved right, to be honest, I think. So that's it really, in terms of the add-ons I've got to show you. So in final summary, I kind of have mentioned it. I don't have a lot of love for the Game Gear. I think it's out of the the holy trinity, I suppose, of these 80s handhelds, in the Game Boy, the Game Gear, and the Lynx. I think the Game Gear is the weakest in pretty much every single area, to be honest. The Game Boy obviously has the best battery life, has the best selection of games. The Lynx was far more powerful at a hardware level, much better screen, better battery life than the Game Gear. It was the Lynx was the best of the colour handhelds. The Game Boy was the best of the non-colour, and the Game Gear kind of, I think, did well to sell as many as it did. I think if Atari had been on the ball a little bit more, they probably would have sold a lot more Lynxes if they'd have got a lot more games out, a lot more third-party support. The Game Gear obviously benefited a bit from being Japanese, so it had sales in Japan that the Lynx didn't have, and benefited from some of Sega's marketing, which was very good at that time, especially in Europe. But yeah, I don't think it's particularly a machine worth owning in the present day for a number of reasons. One, because I just don't think it has enough games exclusive to the system to warrant it. There's too many hardware issues with it. Like I said, most of the ones you'll find will have to be repaired, or you can buy one that already has been repaired, but you're probably going to face more problems in the future. The battery life is poor. Other than nostalgia, I can't really see any other reason to own a Game Gear, unfortunately. I'm a huge Sega fan. I love all my Sega consoles, but the only Sega console I don't love is the Game Gear. I've even got some love for the 32X in many ways, but not the Game Gear. I just think it was a poor handheld, I maintain that to the present day. Thought it was poor back then. I chose the Lynx instead, and I don't think it's aged well as a system either. But that's it. Please let me know your Game Gear memories of what you think of the machine. But thank you for watching. I've been the Retro Laird, and I'll see you all again for another video very soon. Thanks for watching. Bye bye.